Another cultural thing, there was a very famous poet from New Jersey. His name was Joyce Kilmer. He wrote this poem called Trees, and it was a very, very popular poem that addressed the concerns of what was going on with these fires that took place at works at the Carney's Point, and so
city of our, and it's very important that you document the information, so it's information that you know that's going to be very useful to setting your foundation and preparing you for the future. Honorable Mayor J. Christian Bowich, Mayor.
Thanks, Dan. First of all, it's great to be with the other panelists. How are we all doing today? Today is you get out of school, right? I mean, really, when you think of it.
I got the best class.
So you got three other very learned gentlemen up here who know an awful lot about the city of Elizabeth, and I'm thrilled to be with them. But I prepared a little bit of a perspective in the city of Elizabeth. And you know, 100 years is a really, really long time. And I went back, and before I begin, I found some articles in the Daily Journal. It was my mother's father, James Hassan, who on July 20th, 1917, the first person to be drafted for World War I, and 258. And that draft came out, his honeymoon, 17, that he was the lucky number for the first draft. And they wrote some stories in the journal. So that's what happened 100 years ago in a personal relationship in my family. I actually got to meet my grandpa, passed away in 1968, so I was able to spend some time with him. And I didn't know that story then, and I found it out much later. 100 years ago, the price of $1,000. Today, the average is $390,000. 8% of the homes in 1917 had a landline telephone. Anybody know what that is? Do you really know what a landline is? You do? Did you ever see one? Oh, okay. Women didn't have the right to vote, ladies. And this year, you know, we had a woman run for president. She should have won, but anyway. The population in 1917 broke 100 million. Today, in the 20 million. The world literacy rate, how many people could read fluently in 1917, was today the rate is 86%. We are centrally located, as one of the earlier speakers said. We're an economic and a regional hub here in New Jersey. Our location is having jobs for our residents, and it's helped grow over the last 100 years. Today's population was 80,000 people in 1917, and today it's over 125,000. We are currently of over 60% Hispanic individuals. 17, our resident population mostly consisted of European, Irish, English, and African Americans brought to their own cultures and skills to blend our community. Negatively to the existing community were resentment to 27. You know, if you're an outsider, there's still that resentment sometimes. Unfortunately, it does exist. On 17, the United States declared war on Germany. 6 weeks later, on May 8th, the Service Act was passed, which authorized time later in 1917, over 40,000 people worked in the Singer manufacturing facility. They made 75 millimeter cannons, 45 automatic pistols, and by 1918, New Jersey was the largest weapons in America. You heard earlier, it was put in place one leading up to World War II, location in Elizabeth, New Jersey, East and South Front Street. And if you walk, this was not 1970, but if you walk into my office, and you're always all invited, of the first submarine that was purchased by the U.S. Navy in 1900. Submarine, and they can get to call them submarines, but in the river area. The ship parts were made in bridge and tank shops throughout the country. These developments, we have numerous monuments and marking the Great War and bravely served in it. Right across the office, next to the cross street, and the Winfield, there is a really vertical granite corner and it's face to the World War I or the Great War. In our city, one in World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Space Shuttle Challenger, Martin Luther King, Jose Marti, and Ken Ward is going to be touching on these monuments in a few minutes. So in 1970, approximately 4 schools in our city. Today, there are 42 public schools and approximately 3 private schools that are left. The Union Square Market has been an institution in our community in Peterstown since 1970. We still have a market, slowed down a little bit. We have it on Tuesday. And as you heard from Bill, the Rotary Club of the City of Elizabeth was formed in 1917. So now I'd like to turn it back.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's give the mayor the round of applause. You know, when we discuss history, you really can't fit it in all in one session, and that's why several forums have been organized and put together to be able to really lay out the scope of history here in the city, but, you know, expressing different aspects and focusing on different aspects. In my earlier conversations with Ken, we talked about, you know, a vast amount of, it's so much that everything is important, and we want to try to fit it in. So I am honored to be able to introduce Mr. Ken Ward of the Historical Society of Elizabeth, New Jersey. Ken, welcome, and thank you.
Well, the mayor about the monuments, and the monuments are in front of his office in Scott Park. I hope everyone's been there. Elizabeth Scott Park, located in front of City Hall, has a collection of monuments that are reminders of Elizabeth's theme for over 350 years on transportation, immigration, and trade. There are 4 monuments in Scott Park that relate to the World War I, dedicated at the time of the war, but they represent the feelings of the Elizabeth community after the war as the community remembered its war experiences. Monuments are important. If you doubt that, you are not well informed. Public monuments in public spaces are a hot news topic today in many cities in the United States, particularly in the former Confederate states. That war was 150 years ago, yet monument removals, and there, by the way, there are almost 1,000 monuments from the South Confederacy which are scheduled or being considered for being taken away. They now make headlines every day. To many Confederates after the Civil War, the statues conveyed a memory of their dead relatives. As time went on, and the statue had a different meaning to everyone else. That was a reminder of slavery and unjust illegal treatment. Fortunately, our Elizabeth monuments from World War I are an undisputed collection that focuses on the concerns of Elizabethans that are similar to what they were a century ago. The monuments recognize how Elizabeth remembers the contribution to uniting the city at that time when so many residents and families were foreign-born and many from combatant countries. It was not unusual to have people in the same family that were English and German, German and French. That you probably had cousins, aunts, and uncles who were on different sides, not too different from our Civil War here. Elizabethans wanted to be Americans and not just relocated people from somewhere else. Today, additional monuments commemorate the inclusion of more recent residents into the fabric of our community. The 4 World War I monuments are, first, a bell from World War I period from the battleship USS New Jersey. That ship was on duty during World War I in the Caribbean area, and it was to be used in activity that had been threatened by Germany. The USS New Jersey in the 1920s. The Bell Monument is a reminder to all Elizabethans of the critical contribution to the Great War effort of men and war materials that were made right here in Union County. The second monument is a memorial to the Elizabeth soldiers who were killed in World War I. The granite monument with a bronze plaque designed by lists individually all the names of our war dead. The names are critically important because the names depict the diversity of ethnic origin of those killed. It was a true cross-section of the groups of people that made up the Elizabeth population. The third monument is a Purple Heart monument. Although it is somewhat generic to all Purple Heart veterans, at the time it was clearly focused on World War I veterans. The impact of any war continues long after the war. The wounded and disfigured veterans are part of the living memory of a war for the remainder of their lives. The last of the four monuments is focused on a German-oriented singing group, and that singing group is still in existence. Germans made up a large part of our population from colonial times. Although anti-German feeling was widespread during the German group, wanted to stress their identity as Americans and not potential enemies in our midst. We should again remember that many Elizabeth families had close relatives on both sides. There is an additional monument, the largest in Scott Park, and that is intended to recognize all war dead. The impact of the dead and wounded really is just part of the story. Returning soldiers and sailors all have memories in their faces. All of them went to war with close friends and family, but suddenly in combat, their very lives depended on the sorts of people they had only passed an acquaintance with before the war. When safely home, these soldiers could not relate to their relatives and friends that had not been part of the war. Those former soldiers now had much more in common with those people, fellow soldiers, who had similar experiences. These veterans were likely to consider joining social organizations with a wider appeal, such as Veterans of Foreign Wars. These former soldiers were the people who made the monuments appear. They did not want the names of the dead forgotten. They saw their fellow soldiers die, and they did not want them forgotten, nor to forget about the lasting impact of those that were wounded, and they themselves wanted to be remembered because of their experiences that they had. I believe that our Elizabeth monuments will stand the test of time, and that no future Elizabethans will want to remove them, even hundreds of years from now, as is happening elsewhere in this country.
Thank you, Ken. So, we heard from all of our panelists, and now it's time to have a group discussion. And we want to start off, doing a comparison, looking at 1917 to 2017. What's the concept of community? And I want to ask the audience, who knows and who understands the concept of community? Let's talk about 2017. What is community? What does community look like? Can anybody tell me? What is community? Have a mic you want to do? Come to you. We're coming to you. The mic doesn't bite. It's okay. Stand up. There you go.
Like cities, like maybe buildings.
Anybody else? Community. Concept of community. Right up front.
So, community to us is the people who share similar characteristics, cultural background, and family traditions as well.
Awesome. Let's give a big round of applause. Can the panelists, in 1917, what did community look like? What was the concept of community in 1917?
Community essentially broken up by religion, racial background, ethnic background, and everybody stayed pretty much in their own neighborhoods. There wasn't a lot of your community gets bigger, starts out being just people just like you and speak the same language, and it expands later on.
As was touched on, I think what's important to realize is that, as was touched on before, what's important to realize is that, yes, you have these separate communities within the larger city, but when the war comes about, there's a sense of pride, a sense of national commitment. Many people want to prove their commitment to the country. So I had mentioned about the Espionage Act, and one of the things that was talked about was that Germans weren't allowed to go into the war, but actually that didn't keep them from participating and joining the army. And there were soldiers, U.S. soldiers of German ancestry, who actually participated in the war. So there was that bigger sense of, I belong to something bigger, and that's the United States.
Thank you.
We talk about community. These are available for you to look. Approximately, there are 25 names on this list, and I'm going to tell you that approximately those names, if you put a compass, you know what a compass is? Point at Broad Street in Jersey and drew it around, you would have 18, 19 of those members living within about a 5-block area. People live on East Jersey Street, Jefferson, Lafayette, all around Union. So here was a community of varying people coming from various aspects, living within a small area and working with us. And I would suggest to you that membership grew because, hey, or I know you, would you like to join Rotary? And this is how Rotary grew. Now, I do want to add, in Rotarians, they were all men until 1986. In Ridgewood, New Jersey, against the Kiwanis Club, Rotary said, hey, whatever the judgment is, it is, and that's how women came into Rotary. So, a little bit more about community.
So, which is present day, what does community look like here in Elizabeth, New Jersey?
Well, the community in Elizabeth today is extremely diverse, and probably the diversity of our city is our strength, as I've said numerous times. And the immigration of the 1800s of Irish and German and Slovaks and African Americans, even though they came here a little different, as we all know from our history books, that immigration has given way to various Hispanic immigration, some Asian immigration here in our city. And it started with the late 90s with the Cuban immigration. Elizabeth Avenue down community were neglectful. It was the Cuban 60s and started all of the small mom and pop businesses that helped revitalize Elizabeth Avenue. Morris Avenue, if you look at Morris Avenue, it's Little Columbia. Yeah. All you Columbians out there, haven't you got a few here? Woo woo! So look at Morris Avenue. That would not have happened without Colombian immigration. And a really vibrant part of our community. If you go there at night, you can see people dining or going out for night, standing and getting other services. It's a real vision. Here has been the city. It's under, but this country, last 4 in the mid-60s, people first having, we would not be a country without immigration.
Which segues right into the next question. Who are the immigrants in our community today? Can anybody tell me? Who's the mic? Who would like to share? Let's give some, where, right here? You want, okay. Stand up, please tell us what school you're from and name. Do that.
My name is Makaya, and the types of women and
Anybody else? Any other countries? Good. Stand up, tell us your name, what school.
I'm Juliet, and I go to school too, also. Immigrants who nowadays, everyone, in essence, everyone has a background. Everyone comes from different places of the world, whether all grandparents, ancestors, but we're all from a melting pot of people who come here to this country, a home here.
Thank you, yes.
I just wanted, on the immigrant question, you know, that people are resentful of immigrants, and it's been that way, by the way, forever. You look back when the Irish first came here in the 1800s, the Irish were the most discriminated group of African Americans. And I don't mean to compare experience to African Americans, because there is no comparison. The Irish couldn't get work. There used to be signs in stores that said Irish need not apply. So what they did is they became policemen and firemen. If you look at the people in environments throughout this country, they all have Irish names. And if you look at the growth of cities, you can look at the migration. Now, Hispanic, they get picked on. I don't know why, but it happens. So, but in Elizabeth, really well, all of us, in order to make our community a great place.
I want to talk about the war and the impact the war city. How did the war impact the team, and how did that?
One of the big factors about how the war changed Elizabeth and New Jersey was that at one point, New Jersey was essentially cheap labor. And you had manufacturing plants, but you didn't have any research, development, or executive functions. And one of the impacts of World War I is that the United States nationalized German businesses. And so from a place that merely manufactured drugs, anybody ever heard of Bayer Aspirin? That was once a German company. Anybody ever heard of Merck? That was once a German company. And you go down the list of after the war, is all the research and development that was once done in Germany came over to New Jersey. And so from a community that usually just manufactured stuff, we became a center of research, development, and that's of World War I. So many of the jobs in this area were of the outcome of World War I.
To the audience, how can war impact activity in a city, in a community? Yes, have the mic. Tell us your name and the school you represent.
You can all hear me, right?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So, my name is Christian Valderas. I go to Johnny Dwyer. Also Mexican, so, you know. So, as we all know, war can impact everyone in different ways, as we see now in Middle East area. But back then, war can impact people from different backgrounds. So, resentment against people. But at the same time, it can cause us to unite as one nation, as we did in wartime. What we did was we rationed in order to support our soldiers who are out in the field. So they
Who's going to be asking the remainder of the questions for the forum? Great job.
I'd like to make a comment on that. Couple things. Santa Anna, do you remember that name from the Mexican War in 18? He was the president. Anyway, for a brief period, Mexico. He left. He moved around. He had family, and that's why. That's one. Two, close. And in Elizabeth, the Navy ordered shipping or some of the Crescent building operations in Russians. Again, this is early 19th century, before even one. But at the century, 20, Mexico ordered ships from Elizabeth.
Bill, just as a comment for our folks here, listing of Rotarians, original Rotarians, you got a McManus, and a Buzan, and anywhere generic, I don't know what it is. But there was a man by the name of Munoz. So for your Hispanic people here, there were founders in the name of Munoz. So there. So there was that. The point I'm making is back then there was still classes of ethnicity community.
The history runs deep indeed. I'll propose civic engagement. How does civic engagement help to form local civic organizations? Civic engagement. Who can tell me what civic engagement is? Civic engagement. Let's talk about civic engagement. Civic. Tell us your name and school you represent.
Christopher Villanueva Academy.
Welcome.
Engagement, it would be like, basically making a civic life of our communities, and it's like developing a combination of knowledge and from to different organizations like the Rotary Club, and charity events and several other stuff, and it involves getting together each other and benefiting and pretty much helping out public accommodations.
Awesome. Let's give him a big round of applause. How many people here want to change something in society? You see something in society you don't like and you want to make a change in our society? Raise your hand.
Lunch in the schools.
Raise your hand. There you go. Right? That's civic engagement. When you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you get involved, you form an organization, and you start to organize. Fannie in 1960s at a Democratic National Convention said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired," and she was fighting for the Voting Act, and speech that she made, and she got involved and she rallied the troops to make sure that the Voting Rights Act could take place. But let's talk about civic engagement. How does that help us form civic organizations?
Just curious, how many have volunteer service hours that they're required in school? Anybody? Okay, that's civic engagement. That's involved in giving back. So engagement sounds pretty fancy, but really what it is volunteering. And there's a variety of different ways, like that gentleman mentioned in the back, the ways that you can get involved. That's what makes you being a part of it, taking pride in that's an invaluable opportunity for you to take advantage of. It's good that you're involved that way.
Young people, don't think George Washington Bridge. Do small stuff. It doesn't take much. Be fair. What you want to do, you don't have. All you want to do is put a drop in that pool. And the way things are now with vaccine, volunteerism is absolutely essential. If you're in a Boys and Club, you're in a Y, wherever you are, church, whatever it is that I cannot emphasize enough, and I am on a foundation that looks at what young people do as far as extracurricular. You know, you might have 4 straight A's for 4 years in high school, and you have service hours of nil, 35, 40 hours. That doesn't cut it. Not in today. Just do something.
I want to add, you gain more back in your life to give than to receive. You know, when you do, you know, the reward is huge. You know, but I want to hear, what are some things in society that you want to change? You know, what are some things that, you know, there's some small things. It's one step at a time. Like you said, building the George Washington. What are some small things we can change right here in our community? Change. Small things. Something every day. Talk to me. Traffic? Okay. What else? Stand up. One at a time. Will you join me? You'll help me head it up? Civic engagement. We'll get so we're going to do civic engagement. Anybody else over here? Yes? Something you want to do? Oh, we're right behind you. Your name and what school you represent?
My name is Morgan. I go to Frontier Girl Academy, and something that I would really like to see, that would be, I think, a very good improvement in schools, would be to add a recycling system. So with the upcoming news of there being apparently green lands on, that because of our struggles going through with pollution and littering, which is a very big deal in the city, not only that, it's affecting us, well, our atmospheric environment. I just think that's very important that we do that within the city.
Sure. So we want to engage recycling. All right, that's something that can be done. Sometimes what it requires is, so part of civic engagement, Samir can help me out with this. Part of civic engagement, we have one more, is the community actually, right? When the community speaks out and they speak to their elected officials, they speak to people who can still the difference. You now hear the needs of the community, and that's basically what we call a needs assessment, and that's how a lot of changes are made within your community. So you have begun the process of civic engagement. We have a question right here.
My name is Janice D. Gomez, and I attend Dwyer Technology Academy. One of the issues that I see is that by the port area, there's definitely too many houses cluttered next to each other, and not enough space for green areas, grass and trees, and I think that's a real issue that we should consider.
I can't address that, so. That's a really good statement, because that part of the city was built in the 1800s, late 1800s. And back then, building housing close to one another was a way of crowding it in with no open space. So in the last 20 years, though, 25 years, we've addressed the open space issue. Little Apple Park Street, which is small, the marina area and the open space there, the bicycle trail going along the waterfront. We're actually working on getting that bridge that's standing up and straight in the air on Front Street to be a passageway to cross over the other side. And whenever we build new housing, we make it a component to have some type of open space. But you just can't go and tear down all of the existing buildings and say, oh, but we built some parks. We built the Todd Bowles football fields for those Jet fans that are down there. We have the football fields and the soccer fields that we never had before. So we've done some stuff, but you're not wrong. It's just a really slow process in order to create more open space.
Thank you. We have one more question right up front. I think forgot to tell us your name and what school you were from. What is your name? Oh, you did, okay. Miss Gomez, thank you, Miss Gomez. Name and school.
Hi, my name is Melanie and I attend Halsey.
You had a check?
Well, one issue that I find that
Yeah.
one issue that I think we need to address is the fact that sometimes we pay a little bit more attention to other schools when there's like other schools that like generally need fixing. For example, Halsey isn't like in the best conditions. Like there's a lot of things that need to be fixed in Halsey. Like the lockers are really like bad. Like they're really scratched. The bathrooms are really bad too. School programs as well.
Lunch?
Go ahead.
There's clubs, there's like the only thing that's pretty much nice in Halsey is really the media center and I think because like we may focus on the other schools, yes they have the good grades, but that doesn't mean that they don't have good grades.
Awesome. Any more? Okay. Thank you. So, I'm happy to address that. Board president for Elizabeth Board of Education, and one of the key things that we've done this year is we've done a needs assessment of all neighborhood schools and schools who are over 100 years. We have schools in our school district that are like over 100 years old, which then have issues with air conditioning, issues with space, and our high school is an older high school, but definitely does need attention. And what happens is, one of the things I would say is, definitely bring this to the attention of your high school principals and your, they can also voice the opinion. The schools give of what they see needs to be done in their schools, and a priority list is then established as to how to go about doing this. So for example, we want to put air conditioning in schools that don't have air conditioning, but that costs us. Keep clapping because it will happen. It costs $33 million, but it's very expensive in order to do it. So as the mayor stated,
And you'll be graduated by then.
as the mayor stated, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just show up and just put all air conditioners in all the schools. But the assessment is done so that we can go in and make and do small things at a time. And I think lockers and painting the school and making sure that it's fresh and making sure that we have trash receptacles in all the buildings so that they can be clean and that they have some TLC is something that definitely can be done. So we'll follow up to see what your needs are and make sure that Halsey and Dwyer and all the schools, and School 2, School 4, and Elizabeth High School, and Jefferson, they're all getting the attention that they need. Oh, okay, cool. All right, so we're going to start to wrap it up, but this is a process of civic engagement, and let's give ourselves a big round of applause. Engaging and taking part in the process. One last thing we want to leave you with, we want to talk about the monuments. And we have some pretty interesting monuments that the mayor talked about. Some of the monuments and how they reflect 1917 to 2017. And I think we have some newer monuments there that have been established.
Well, I mentioned 4 that were, we've actually since then had all kinds of other monuments, particularly national heroes, Marquis and several others.
Dominican Republic. General. It'll come to me.
In the past, we had Columbus, we got moved, and
Columbus got moved back to Peterstown.
yes, and monuments are
Vietnam
important.
Memorial is there now.
We have several from the Civil War period. We have some for the Revolution on Elizabeth Avenue. Monuments. We have several interesting. What's the one with the USS Maine?
Yeah. I'm glad you raised it. Down in Jackson Park. Who's down the port? Some young girl said they were down. Yeah. You know what the park is, right across from St. Parts of the Art Academy. There's a believe it or not, a shell from the USS Maine. It's on the street facing St. Patrick's. That's an actual shell from the USS Maine, and I don't know how we got it. and one of the people, descendants of someone killed there, joined me in the anniversary of the USS Maine a couple of years ago, and we refurbished it. And we also have a monument on North Broad Street to the Civil War,
Yes.
in that triangle park there.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank our distinguished panelists. Let's give them another big round of applause. Time is short and it's brief and about civic engagement. Are there any other questions that maybe we didn't ask that anybody would like to ask? Elizabeth Ford, Diana, give her a big round of applause. Amy Fernandez Fuentes. I want to thank our trustee, Ms. Celia Mantilla, who's here with us. The executive director of Future Cities and trustee, also in the Society, Michelle McGee. Thank you. To our distinguished panelists, of course, our honorable Mayor Jacob Bowen, Mr. John Prescott, Kenneth G. Ward, Bill Melia. Also want to thank our partners, the County of Union, of course, the City of Elizabeth, the Elizabeth Public Library, our library director who's here with us today. Thank you. The Rotary Club, celebrating 100 years, give them a big round of applause. In about an hour from now, we'll be actually joining the Rotary Club as they issue scholarships to our graduating seniors. So we want to thank the Rotary Club again for all their work. But I cannot forget our students. John Dwyer Academy, Halsey Academy, Jefferson Academy, Frank J. Ciccarell Academy, School number 2. You can do better than that. School number 2. School number 4. Did I miss anyone? Okay, I think I got them all. I didn't say Halsey the first time? Halsey! Is that bad? Okay, got it. And to our administrators, Diane Pinto Gomez, McCarthy, all our teachers, administrators, who have joined us this morning. It has been truly an honor and pleasure to host this forum. Mary Faith, Director of our library, you want to say a little?
I just want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank the Historic Society for reaching out to us to be a venue, and I hope we will continue offering our venue to you for future occasions. We're very happy to have you all students and the panelists here this morning. And while you leave, students, we're going to hand you some information about summer activities here at the library. And if you're looking for open space, you know there's a community garden at which you can volunteer at the Aurora Public Library in the Aurora area. So if you're interested in open spaces, we've got a community garden where we can put you to work, okay?
One last thing. You can tune in.
In the local history room that has all the resources for research and materials that might be of interest if you're doing research on the city of Elizabeth or the county of Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much again. You can tune in to ESPS TV, which is the Elizabeth Public Schools TV. EPS TV, Elizabeth Public Schools. EPS, what did I say? ESPS? I'm thinking ESPN, too much basketball. Anyway, EPS TV to do a recap of this forum today. You'll be able to see it on our website. Catch pictures of this wonderful forum. So smile for the make sure you take some pictures. And it's been an honor to be your moderator this morning. We look forward to seeing you at our next forum. Have a wonderful and I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Thank you.
Guys, we're going to be exiting since there's so many students and you can't all run out of the room at the same time. To school by school. We're going to start in the back and move forward. So please stay seated. your school is ready to leave.